Well, good evening, Internet. I hope this finds you well. Thanks for coming on the journey of Oz with me. Yes, it's in the evening, and yes, I'm drinking coffee because coffee is good any time of day. Especially if you're a little drowsy and you missed your nap time and too late for a nap, too early to go to bed. Coffee's a compromise, I guess. You know? Do you know? Do you know where you're going to? I never have. But that's what makes life exciting. It's all about the journey. It's more fun to be spontaneous and, not spontaneously combustible. That would suck. But spontaneous and random, and just something grabs your interest. Go there. Go do that. Plans are great, but life's too short to plan the whole thing. Never mind. Let's just read the book. Just read the book, Grandpa. Just read the book. We're dying to know what's happened next. We want to know how Dorothy happened to get lost. Oh, brother. Chapter 15. It was a beautiful evening, so they drew their camp chairs in a circle before one of the tents and began to tell stories to amuse themselves and pass away the time before they went to bed. Pretty soon a zebra was seen coming out of the forest, and he trotted straight up to them and said politely, "Good evening, people." The zebra was a slick little animal and had a slender head, a stubby mane, and a paintbrush tail, very like a donkey's. His neatly shaped white body was covered with regular bars of dark brown, and his hooves were delicate as those of a deer. "Good evening, friend zebra," said Omby Amby, in reply to the creature's greeting. "Can we do anything for you?" "Yes," answered the zebra. "I should like you to settle a dispute that has long been a bother to me, as to whether there is more water or land in the world." "Who are you disputing with?" asked the wizard. "With the soft-shell crab," said the zebra. "He lives in a pool where I go to drink every day, and he is a very impertinent crab, I assure you. I have told him many times that the land is much greater in extent than the water, but he will not be convinced. Even this very evening, when I told him he was an insignificant creature who lived in a small pool, he asserted that the water was greater and more important than the land. So, seeing your camp, I decided to ask you to settle the dispute for once and all, that I may not be further annoyed by this ignorant crab." When they had listened to this explanation, Dorothy inquired, "Where is the soft-shell crab?" "Not far away," replied the zebra. "If you will agree to judge between us, I will run and get him." "Run along, then," said the little girl. So the animal pranced into the forest and soon came trotting back to them. When he drew near, they found a soft-shelled crab clinging fast to the stiff hair of the zebra's head, where it held on by one claw. "Now then, Mr. Crab," said the zebra, "here are the people I told you about, and they know more than you do, who live in a pool, and more than I do, who live in a forest, for they have been travelers all over the world and know every part of it. There's more of the world than Oz, declared the crab in a stubborn voice. That is true, said Dorothy, but I used to live in Kansas in the United States, and I've been to California and to Australia, and so has Uncle Henry. For my part, added the Shaggy Man, I've been to Mexico and Boston and many other foreign countries. And I, said the wizard, have been to Europe and Ireland. So you see, continued the zebra, addressing the crab, here are people of real consequence who know what they are talking about. Then they know there's more water in the world than there is land, asserted the crab in a shrill, petulant voice. They know you are wrong to make such an absurd statement, and they will probably think you are a lobster instead of a crab, retorted the animal. At this taunt, the crab reached out its other claw and seized the zebra's ear, and the creature gave a cry of pain and began prancing up and down, trying to shake off the crab, which clung fast. Stop pinching, cried the zebra. You promised not to pinch if I would carry you here. And you promised to treat me respectfully, said the crab, letting go the ear. Well, haven't I? Demanded the zebra. No, you called me a lobster, said the crab. Ladies and gentlemen, continued the zebra, please pardon my poor friend because he is ignorant and stupid and does not understand. Also, the pinch of his claw is very annoying. So pray tell him that the world contains more land than water, and when he has heard your judgment, I will carry him back and dump him into his pool, where I hope he will be more modest in the future. But we cannot tell him that, said Dorothy gravely, because it would not be true. What? Exclaimed the zebra in astonishment. Do I hear you all right? The soft-shell crab is correct, declared the wizard. There is considerably more water than there is land in the world. Impossible, protested the zebra. Why, I can run for days upon the land and find but little water. Did you ever see an ocean? Asked Dorothy. Never, admitted the zebra. There is no such thing as an ocean in the land of Oz. Well, there are several oceans in the world, said Dorothy, and people sail in ships upon these oceans for weeks and weeks and never see a bit of land at all. And the geographies will tell you that all the oceans put together are bigger than all the land put together. At this, the crab began laughing in queer chuckles that reminded Dorothy of the way Billina sometimes cackled. Now will you give up, Mr. Zebra? It cried jeeringly. Now will you give up? The zebra seemed much humbled. Of course, I cannot read geographies, he said. You could take one of the wizard's school pills, suggested Billina, and that would make you learned and wise without studying. The crab began laughing again, which so provoked the zebra that he tried to shake the little creature off. This resulted in more ear pinching, and finally Dorothy told them that if they could not behave, they must go back to the forest. I'm sorry I asked you to decide this question, said the zebra crossly. So long as neither of us could prove we were right, we quite enjoyed the dispute, but now I can never drink at that pool again without the soft-shell crab laughing at me. So I must find another drinking place." "Do, do, you ignoramus," shouted the crab as loudly as his little voice would carry. "Rile some other pool with your clumsy hoofs, and let your betters alone after this." Then the zebra trotted back into the forest, bearing the crab with him, and disappeared among the gloom of the trees. And as it was now getting dark, the travelers said good night to one another and went to bed. Dorothy awoke just as the light was beginning to get strong next morning, and not caring to sleep any later, she quietly got out of bed, dressed herself, and left the tent where Aunt Em was yet peacefully slumbering. Outside, she noticed Billina busily pecking around to secure bugs and other food for breakfast, but none of the men in the other tent seemed awake. So the little girl decided to take a walk in the woods and try to discover some path or road that they might find when they again started up their journey. She reached the edge of the forest when the yellow hen came fluttering along and asked where she was going. "Just to take a walk, Billina, and maybe I'll find some path," said Dorothy. "Then I'll go along," said Billina, and scarcely had she spoken when Toto ran up and joined them. Toto and the yellow hen had become quite friendly by this time, although at first they did not get along well together. Billina had been rather suspicious of dogs, and Toto had had an idea that it was every dog's duty to chase a hen on sight. But Dorothy had talked to them and scolded them for not being agreeable to one another until they grew better acquainted and became friends. I won't say they loved each other dearly, but at least they had stopped quarreling and now managed to get on together very well. The day was growing lighter every minute and driving the black shadows out of the forest. So Dorothy found it very pleasant walking under the trees. She went some distance in one direction, but not finding a path, presently turned in a different direction. There was no path here either, although she advanced quite a way into the forest, winding here and there among the trees and peering through the bushes in an endeavor to find some beaten track. "I think we'd better go back," suggested the yellow hen after a time. "The people will all be up by this time, and breakfast will be ready." "Very well," agreed Dorothy. "Let's see. The camp must be over this way." She had probably made a mistake about that, for after they had gone far enough to have reached the camp, they still found themselves in the thick of the woods. So the little girl stopped short and looked around her, and Toto glanced up into her face and with his bright little eyes and wagged his tail as if he knew something was wrong. He couldn't tell much about direction himself, because he had spent his time prowling among the bushes and running here and there. But a dog is supposed to be able to smell his tracks, be able to find his way back. Come on, Toto. Anyway, that was disappointing. Nor had Billina paid much attention to where they were going, being interested in picking bugs from the moss as they passed along. The yellow hen now turned one eye up toward the little girl and asked, "Have you forgotten where the camp is, Dorothy?" "Yes," she admitted. "Have you, Billina?" "I didn't try to remember," returned Billina. "I'd no idea you would get lost, Dorothy." Well, come on, that's all Dorothy does is get lost. That's how she ends up on these adventures. "It's the thing we don't expect, Billina, that usually happens," observed the girl thoughtfully. "But it's no use standing here. Let's go in that direction," pointing a finger at random. "It may be we'll get out of the forest over there." So on they went again, but this way the trees were closer together and the vines were so tangled that often they tripped Dorothy up. Suddenly a voice cried sharply, "Halt!" At first Dorothy could see nothing, although she looked around very carefully. But Billina exclaimed, "Well, I declare!" "What is it?" asked the little girl, for Toto began barking at something, and following his gaze she discovered what it was. A row of spoons had surrounded the three, and these spoons stood straight up on their handles and carried swords and muskets. Their faces were outlined in the polished bowls, and they looked very stern and severe. Oh, missed. Little bug. Little fly. Fruit fly, probably. Dorothy laughed at the queer things. "Who are you?" she asked. "We're the Spoon Brigade," said one. "In the service of His Majesty King Cleaver," said another. "And you are our prisoners," said a third. Dorothy sat down on an old stump and looked at them, her eyes twinkling with amusement. "What would happen," she inquired, "if I should just set on my dog on your brigade?" "He would die," replied one of the spoons sharply. "One shot from our deadly muskets would kill him, big as he is." "Don't risk it, Dorothy," advised the yellow hen. "Remember, this is a fairy country, yet none of us three happens to be a fairy." Dorothy grew sober at this. "Perhaps you're right, Billina," she answered. "But how funny it is to be captured by a lot of spoons." "I do not see anything very funny about it," declared a spoon. "We're the regular military brigade of the kingdom." "What kingdom?" she asked. "Utensia," said he. "I never heard of it before," asserted Dorothy. Then she added thoughtfully, "I don't believe Ozma ever heard of Utensia either. Tell me, are you not subjects of Ozma the Oz? "We never have heard of her," retorted the spoon. "We are subjects of King Cleaver, and obey only his orders, which are to bring all prisoners to him as soon as they are captured. So set lively, my girl, and march with us, or we may be tempted to cut off a few of your toes with our swords." This threat made Dorothy laugh again. She did not believe she was in any danger, but here was a new and interesting adventure, so she was willingly to be taken to Utensia, that she might see King Cleaver's kingdom was like. There's the spoons, the army, escorting the three of them. Chapter 16, How Dorothy Visited Utensia. There must have been from 6 to 8 dozen spoons in the brigade, and they marched away in the shape of a hollow square, with Dorothy, Billina, and Toto in the center of the square. Before they had gone very far, Toto knocked over one of the spoons by wagging his tail, and then the captain of the spoons told the little dog to be more careful, or he would be punished. So Toto was careful, and the Spoon Brigade moved along with astonishing swiftness, while Dorothy really had to walk fast to keep up with it. Toto. By and by they left the woods and entered a big clearing, in which was the kingdom of Utensia. Standing all around the clearing were a good many cook stoves, ranges, and grills of all sizes and shapes, and besides these there were several kitchen cabinets and cupboards and a few kitchen tables. These things were crowded with utensils of all sorts. frying pans, saucepans, kettles, forks, knives, basting and soup spoons, nutmeg graters, sifters, colanders, meat saws, flat irons, rolling pins, and many other things of a like nature. That's a lot of sharp things in one place, boy. When the spoon brigade appeared with the prisoners, a wild shout arose, and many of the utensils hopped off their stoves or their benches and ran crowding around Dorothy and the hen and the dog. "Stand back!" cried the captain sternly, and he led his captives through the curious throng until they came before a big range that stood in the center of the clearing. Beside this range was a butcher's block upon which lay a great cleaver with a keen edge. It rested upon the flat of its back, its legs were crossed, and it was smoking a long pipe. See, you see up there, sitting on the... Okay, there you go. Get the whole picture. Here we go. "Wake up, your majesty," said the captain. "Here are prisoners." Hearing this, King Cleaver sat up and looked at Dorothy sharply. Ha ha! Wow. He's a cleaver, and he looked at her sharply. "Gristle and fat," he cried, "where did this girl come from?" "I found her in the forest and brought her here with a prisoner," replied the captain. "Why did you do that?" inquired the king, puffing his pipe lazily. "To create some excitement," the captain answered. "It is so quiet here that we are all getting rusty for want of amusement. For my part, I prefer to see stirring times." Oh, gosh, the puns are getting deep, like a big pot. "Naturally," returned the cleaver with a nod. "I have always said, Captain, without a bit of irony, that you are a sterling officer and a solid citizen, bold and polished to a degree. But what do you expect me to do with these prisoners?" "That is for you to decide," declared the captain. "You are the king." To be sure, muttered the cleaver amusingly. "As you say, we have had dull times since the steel and grindstone eloped and left us." Oh, no. No wonder it's been dull. "Command my counselors and the royal courtiers to attend me, as well as the high priest and the judge. We'll then decide what can be done." The captain saluted and retired, and Dorothy sat down on an overturned kettle and asked, "Have you anything to eat in your kingdom?" "Here, get up, get off from me," cried a faint voice, at which His Majesty the Cleaver said, "Excuse me, but you're sitting on my friend the tin-quart kettle." Dorothy at once arose, and the kettle turned right side up and looked at her reproachfully. "I'm a friend of the king, so no one dares sit on me," said he. "I prefer a chair anyway," she replied. "Sit on that hearth," commanded the king. So Dorothy sat on the hearth shelf of the big range, and the subjects of Utensia began to gather around in a large and inquisitive throng. Toto lay at Dorothy's feet, and Billina flew up upon the range, which had no fire in it, and perched there as comfortably as she could. When all the counselors and courtiers had assembled, and these seemed to include most of the inhabitants of the kingdom, the king rapped on the block for order and said, "Friends and fellow utensils, Our worthy commander of the Spoon Brigade, Captain Dip. This is comical. Has captured the 3 prisoners you see before you and brought them here for I don't know what for. So I ask your advice how to act in this matter, and what fate I should mete out to these captives. Judge Sifter, stand on my right. It is your business to sift this affair to the bottom. High Priest Colander, stand on my left, and see that no one testifies falsely in this matter. As these 2 officials took their places, Dorothy asked, "Why is the Colander the High Priest?" "He's the holiest thing we have in the kingdom," replied King Cleaver. "Except me," said a sieve. "I'm the whole thing when it comes to holes." Oh, this is a clever chapter. "What we need," remarked the king rebukingly, "is a wireless sieve. I must speak to Marconi about it. These old-fashioned sieves talk too much. Now, it is the duty of the king counselors to counsel the king at all times of emergency. So I beg you to speak out and advise me what to do with these prisoners." "I demand that they be killed several times until they are dead," shouted a pepperbox, hopping around very excitedly. "Compose yourself, Mr. Paprika," advised the king. "Your remarks are piquant and highly seasoned, but you need a scattering of common sense. It is only necessary to kill a person once to make him dead, but I do not see that it is necessary to kill this little girl at all." "I don't either," said Dorothy. "Pardon me, but you are not expected to advise me in this matter," replied King Cleaver. "Why not?" asked Dorothy. "You might be prejudiced in your own favor, and so mislead us," he said. "Now then, good subjects, who speaks next?" "I'd like to smooth this thing over in some way," said a Flatiron earnestly. "We are supposed to be useful to mankind, you know." "But the girl isn't mankind. She's womankind," yelled a corkscrew. "What do you know about it?" inquired the king. "I'm a lawyer," said the corkscrew proudly. "I am accustomed to appear at the bar." "But you're crooked," retorted the king, "and that debars you. You may be a corking good lawyer, Mr. Pop, but I must ask you to withdraw your remarks." "Very well," said the corkscrew, sadly. "I see I haven't any pull at this court." "Permit me," continued the Flatiron, "to press my suit, your majesty. I do not wish to gloss over any fault the prisoner may have committed, if such a fault exists, but we owe her some consideration, and that's flat." "I'd like to hear from Prince Carver," said the king. At this, a stately carving knife stepped forward and bowed. "The captain was wrong to bring this girl here, and she was wrong to come," he said. "But now that the foolish deed is done, let us all prove our mettle and have a slashing good time." That's it," screamed a fat chopping knife. "We'll make mincemeat of the girl and hash of the chicken and sausage of the dog." There was a shout of approval at this, and the king had to rap again for order. "Gentlemen, gentlemen," he said, "your remarks are somewhat cutting and rather disjointed, as might be expected from these acute intellects, but you give no reasons for your demands." "See here, Cleaver, you make me tired," exclaimed the saucepan, strutting before the king very impudently. "You're about the worst king that ever reigned in Utensia, and that's saying a good deal. Why don't you run things yourself instead of asking everybody's advice, like the big clumsy idiot you are?" The king sighed. "I wish there wasn't a saucepan in my kingdom," he said. "You fellows are always stewing over something, and every once in a while you slop over and make a mess of it. Go hang yourself, sir, by the handle, and don't let me hear from you again." Oh, this is fun. Dorothy was much shocked by the dreadful language, the utensils employed. Maybe a misspell. And she thought that they must have had very little proper training. So she said, addressing the king, who seemed very unfit to rule his turbulent subjects, "I wish you'd decide my fate right away. I can't stay here all day, trying to find out what you're going to do with me." "This thing is becoming a regular broil, and it's time I took part in it," observed a big gridiron, coming forward. "What I'd like to know," said a can opener in a shrill voice, "is why the girl came to our forest anyhow, and why she intruded upon Captain Dip, who ought to be called Dippy, and who she is, and where she came from, and where she is going, and why, and wherefore, and therefore, and when." "I'm sorry to see, Sir Jabber," remarked the king to the can opener, "that you have such a prying disposition. As a matter of fact, all the things you mentioned are none of our business." Having said this, the king relighted his pipe, which had gone out. "Tell me, please, what is our business?" inquired a potato masher, winking at Dorothy somewhat impertinently. "I'm fond of little girls myself, and it seems to me she has as much right to wander in the forest as we have." "Who accuses the little girl anyway?" inquired a rolling pin. "What has she done?" "I don't know," said the king. "What has she done, Captain Dip?" "That's the trouble, your majesty. She hasn't done anything," replied the captain. "What do you want me to do?" asked Dorothy. This question seemed to puzzle them all. Finally, a chafing dish exclaimed irritably, "If no one can throw any light on this subject, you must excuse me if I go out." At this, a big kitchen fork pricked up its ears and said in a tiny voice, "Let's hear from Judge Sifter." "That's proper," returned the king. So Judge Sifter turned around slowly several times and then said, "We have nothing against the girl except the stove hearth upon which she sits. Therefore, I order her instantly discharged." "Discharged?" cried Dorothy. "Why, I never was discharged in my life, and I don't intend to be. If it's all the same to you, I'll resign." "It's all the same," declared the king. "You are free, you and your companions, and may go wherever you like." "Thank you," said the little girl. But haven't you anything to eat in your kingdom? I'm hungry. Go into the woods and pick blackberries, advised the king, laying down upon his back again and preparing to go to sleep. There isn't a morsel to eat in all Utensia that I know of. So Dorothy jumped up and said, Come on, Toto and Bellina. If we can't find the camp, we may find some blackberries. The utensils drew back and allowed them to pass without protest, although Captain Dip marched the spoon brigade in close order after them until they had reached the edge of the clearing. There the spoons halted, but Dorothy and her companions entered the forest again and began searching diligently for a way back to camp, that they might rejoin their party. There's King Cleaver. Nope. And that's all. Next is how they came to Bunbury. Which will be chapter 17. All right, well, there's the beginning of the second half of the book. There's 30 chapters in this one. It's a long one. Some of the chapters were very long. One of those videos, I think the last one or the one before was like 45, 50 minutes. Well, 50 minutes with my yak. But it is what it is. Oh, I gotta turn this off. There we go. Whew. Well, I'll turn some other light on. Hold on. There we go. Sun's starting to go down. Mrs. Grumpaw, or Kickback Crochet, as she is known in the YouTube world, is off at her crochet club that they have nicknamed themselves the Springtown Hookers. Because, crochet, they use a hook. It's funny. It's funny. Come on, laugh. What's the point of life if you don't have fun? Oh no, I'm a battery and I got too hot, but I didn't explode, so you're lucky. Ew. All right, I'm just being silly now. Anyway, I can't leave you just abruptly like that. I have to do my usual goodbye, and I wouldn't feel right if I didn't wish you sweet dreams.